In this video, I'll show how to add text onto your UI. We'll add our text on as a game object parented under our HUD canvas, telling the player to select a character, selecting either the boy or girl character we've set up previously. To do this, choose Game Object and UI, and then Text. This creates a text object on our HUD canvas. You can alternately drag a text object onto it to parent it if you'd like. We can see our text, New Text, centered on that HUD canvas. Right now it's in its default position with the default Arial font. The reason for doing it as a game object here instead of a component is so that this text has its own rect transform. If we select our canvas and create a text component, it will look to the rect transform of that canvas if it's available if we're using World Space mode. We want to be able to use an independent anchor for our text, maintaining a constant position regardless of how that canvas is scaling. Next, we'll change the text. Type in the text box, select a character. We want to tell the player what to do. This brings up an important point in UI design. It's important to not overwhelm the player with too much information. If somebody is spending too much time reading the UI, they may miss out on important gameplay, so we need to keep our UI messaging short. If your UI includes a longer section of story that's meant to be read, make sure you give the player ample time to read it and present it in a way that's actually readable on screen. For UI elements like this, we need to be direct. Select a character. Next, we'll get in the right font. We've included the Luckiest Guy font with the assets for this project. I'll click on the circle select next to Arial and choose here in the Assets, Luckiest Guy. Alternately, you can drag it in from the Fonts folder in the Assets. I'll close the select font, and now we can see it says select a character in that Luckiest Guy font. Unity has font tools available, much like other programs out there. We can select a font, and within that font, if there are multiple styles, select them. Luckiest Guy comes with normal, bold, italic, and bold and italic. We can also size our font and choose our line spacing, the leading between lines. And then we can align our paragraphs as we'd like to design our UI and get that text flowing properly. I'll click Centered on the paragraph alignment, and then bring up the font size to 50. What we're seeing is that that box is not big enough for that text. We actually need to increase the width and height correctly, or allow that text to overflow the horizontal bounds so it shows up properly. It's disappearing because the size of 50 is too big for this box as laid out in the rect transform. First, let's change that color to white so that we can see this text clearly. Clicking on the color swatch and selecting white in here in that color picker. The way to control how that text flows into that bounding box is in the horizontal and vertical overflow. Right now what it's trying to do is to wrap this text. I'll change wrap to overflow and vertical to overflow, and then our text comes back. What we're saying here is that it's okay for this text to overflow its rect transform. What I'd actually like to do is to size this box correctly. So I'll move this back from overflow to wrap, and the vertical, right now set as overflow, oddly clips the words, so we'll move it back to truncate. Our text disappears once more, and what we need to do then is to position on 0 and 0 and set the width to 300 with a height of 60. This is still not enough. We can see we definitely need more room. We also need to play with the scale of that text and the minimum and maximum on the anchors. Here's a width of 600 and a height of 60, and now we can see all of that text. This is actually saying that the width and height of that box allows that text to fit in, as is dictated by the horizontal and vertical overflow found here under the paragraph section. This will determine then how text flows in a text box if we have a paragraph on screen, or how those lines drop down, and we can use our leading controls between if we need. It does look like that text box is a little bit big, so I'll take that width down to 500, and the text still stays at one line. It's also a little tall, so I'll try a height of 50, trying to fit that box around the text as well as possible. We also need to change the position on Y. Right now we can see that that text is centered as is dictated by that position of 0, 0 on the canvas. This means that the text will overwhelm anything there, including obscuring our characters. So I'll take this text and pull it up. I'll press W for move or select the move tool, and I can move this game object of text up on the screen. I'll pull it up to a Y of about 70, so it's in the upper third of that canvas, and our player characters in their spotlights will be down below it. Now that we've created our select a character text, informing the player what to do, we also need to create some game over text. When the player is overwhelmed by the zombies and dies, this text will flash on the screen, telling the player that the game is over. Again, choose Game Object and UI from the top menu, and then Text. For this text, which we'll rename to Game Over Text, we'll put in the text of Game Over! Exclamation point. Change the font over to Luckiest Guy, the font size to 50, change the text color to white, leave horizontal overflow at wrap and vertical at truncate, and then go up to the rect transform for this particular text and increase the width out to 300 and the height to 50. There's our game over text, which we'll leave at 0, 0 on the position X and Y. This will center that text right on the screen, telling the player in no uncertain terms that the game is over. Once you've gotten your text properly configured for your game over, uncheck it in the inspector, turning it off. We'll trigger it when that condition is met, that the game is over. We don't want that text showing all the time as part of our UI. If you'd like to go further, you can add additional text on to the pause panel, putting in text for pause, resume, and music.